Hilchot Deot Mishneh Torah Rambam. Let us go back for a moment to Halacha Yod Aleph in the Machon edition, which is Halacha Hey, something like the Hey and Wow in other editions. Today we would say Benoniyot. Derech is usually considered nowadays to be a noun, which is feminine. In other words, Rambam previously explained that when it comes to attributes of character, personality, what we generally refer to as midoth, all midoth can be viewed as existing on a spectrum. And therefore, by definition, you have extremes at both ends of the spectrum, and you have a mid-range. And Rambam explained previously, as this was in Halacha Wow in the Machon Shilo edition, Haderech HaYeshara, Rambam wrote there, Hi midah benoni shebechol de'ah v'de'ah. Again, when Rambam says de'ah, we would use the word midah or some similar term. So Hilchot Deot is not a discussion of opinions, but rather of behavior and character traits. So we should be aiming for somewhere in the middle. And Rambam explained, gave an example of this in Halacha Zayin in the Machon Shilo edition. Kesad lo yeheh ba'al hema noach lich'os. A person should not be an angry person by definition. So he's always angry and always finds reasons to be angry. And believe me, there are plenty of reasons in this world to be angry. No shortage of that at all. And as every day goes by, and as you hear a bit of news here and there, whether you wish to or not, you have further reasons to be angry. Nevertheless, we also have to keep in mind that which it states in Tehillim Perek Tzadi Beth Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, that I will bring it up for a moment. In fact, let me do that. I think it's worthwhile doing so. You should be able to see now Tehillim Perek Tzadi Beth, correct? Is that right? You can see it?
Yes.
So, Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat. What is this Mizmor all about? It is about Pasuk well, Ma gadlu ma'asecha Adonai, ma'od ommeku mahshavotecha. Hashem's plans and designs for the world are extremely profound and deep, greater than any man can understand fully. Ish ba'ar lo yada, kol sheken, a foolish man, ish ba'ar lo yada, will never understand such things. Uchsil, the vain fool, lo yavin et zot. And what is this, the principal thing being discussed here in Pasuk Het? Bifroach Roshaim kamo Esav, wa yislisu kol po'alei awen. When we see the evil doers, those who reject Hashem's laws, even the most basic norms of human behavior, civilized human behavior, they are Roshaim, and po'alei awen refers, as Rav Hirsch explains in his Perush on Tehillim, refers to people who misuse power, evildoers who are in positions of power and influence. Yes, these people have their day and they do their worst, but eventually they eventually meet their downfall. Whereas the word of Hashem and his teachings and those who follow him and Hashem himself, but the truth will always outlast them and be triumphant. Yitparadu refers to essentially disintegration. The evil causes its own disintegration, as if Hashem doesn't have to do anything about it. It happens by itself because the insanity, the evil, the diabolical and nonsensical ideologies of such people bring about their own downfall. So that's just something to keep in mind when we look at the world and we think to ourselves, what does one do with such a world? Well, one should be bothered, but one should not, on the other hand, one should most certainly be bothered by what we see, many things that we see. On the other hand, we should also be aware of the fact that Yesh Ba'al Labira, there is a master of the machine, as it were. Just one moment. Just 1 second. So we return to Hilchot Deot. Perek Aleph. So Rambam was saying in Hilchot Zayin, you can see the Rambam now? Okay. The Rambam was saying in Hilchot Zayin in the Machon Shilo edition, Kesad lo yeh ba'al hema v'noach lichos. Nor should you be indifferent and unfeeling, insensate, as it were. And that's precisely what I was discussing a moment ago. We cannot be, as it were, unaware or indifferent to what we see going on. Nevertheless, we should be benoni, we should be balanced. That's what I was getting at. There are things that are worthy of our anger and our outrage, so that such a thing will not be done again. So that was Rambam discussed this earlier, and now Rambam says in Halacha Yod Aleph, this is Halacha Hey in other editions, or the end of Halacha Hey, and wow, these are the desirable modalities of behavior and thought. You are to walk in the ways of Hashem. Now, how can one do that? How can one walk in the ways of Hashem? And therefore Rambam continues. This is how this is explained by the Chachamim, this mitzvah. Keep in mind that the Rambam listed this at the very beginning of the list of mitzvot aseh, the 11 mitzvot aseh and lo ta'aseh in this section. The first was the hidamot bidrachal, to emulate Hashem's ways. Kach lamedu beferush mitzvah zo, says Rambam. This is halacha wa in some editions. Halacha Yud Aleph, in the edition before us. Mahu nikra hanun, af ata haye hanun. You are to be forgiving, compassionate, just as Hashem is described as being so. Mahu nikra rahum, merciful, afatah hiya rahum. Mahu nikra kadosh, afatah hiya kadosh. Hashem is described as being holy, which means above and beyond the mundane. That is the simplest way to translate it. Of course, there is a great difference between the kedusha that is achievable by a human being and the kedusha ascribed to Hashem. But we are not told to be Hashem, we are told to emulate Hashem's ways to the extent that it is doable, that it is feasible and reasonable. Rambam later will explain that there are also things that are unreasonable, that a person should not attempt to do. While derech zeh qara'u hanaviim ra'el b'chol otham hakinuim, and thus we find the Nevi'im referring to Hashem from Moshe Rabbeinu onwards. We find the various Nevi'im even before Moshe, perhaps Abraham Avinu also. Erech Apayim, Rav Hasan, Sadiq, Yashar, Tomim, Gibor, Hazak. All these terms, long-suffering, merciful, righteous, powerful, etc. All these terms are used to describe Hashem. In order to inform us. These are the types of behavior and attributes which we should place before ourselves, before our eyes, as aims and aspirations, things to which we should aspire. And a person is required. This is not an optional extra. Hayava, though, it is commanded by Hashem. We are commanded to train ourselves to behave in these ways, and to regulate and, when necessary, of course, modify and change the way in which we live in order to emulate Hashem's ways. Rambam continues, Halacha Yod Beth. וכיצד ירגיל אדם עצמו בדעות אלו עד שיקבעו בו. How is a person to train himself in these types of behavior until they become kavua, second nature, perhaps eventually first nature? יעשה וישנה וישלש במעשים שעושה על פי הדעות האמצעיות. It is simply by habit. One trains oneself by doing the right thing, training, thinking, being aware of everything that goes on and how we relate to these things and how we respond and how we react and how we behave. We train ourselves. We do it once, twice, 3 times. Following this balanced approach. And this is an ongoing process until it becomes straightforward, essentially, as we said, second nature. The person will not have to work on himself constantly if he's treading the correct path. Eventually it becomes straightforward and self-evident. And these things will eventually be fixed in his soul, in his character, in his behavior. Yod Gimel, or part of Halacha Zayin, Ulefi shemot ha'elu shenikra b'hem hayoser hen haderech habenoni. Shanu hayavim lalechet ba. And seeing that these attributes, these types of behavior, are the balanced and correctly modulated path and way of conducting ourselves that we are required to follow. It is called the way of Hashem. And this is what Avraham Avinu taught his descendants. למען אשר יצאו את בנו ואת ביתו אחריו ושמרו דרך אדוני לעשות צדקה ומשפט. So Rambam connects this pasuk in Sefer Bereshit to this concept, this pasuk which discusses Derech Hashem, to this this perspective and understanding of human behavior. If we take the example of Sadaqah, for example, as we mentioned, I think before, Sadaqah is a very important miswah. All Jews are hayav to perform this miswah of Sadaqah, of charity. But really it's also a matter of balance. In other words, a person has to, on the one hand, think of himself, of his family, his needs, his obligations. On the other hand, the same person has to be aware of others, people who are less fortunate, people who are experiencing hardship, difficulty, and require assistance. One cannot be only Hanun Warahum and give away everything he has to the detriment of himself, his family, etc. Nor can one say, well, I have so many obligations and I simply haven't got enough, so I cannot spare anything for anybody else. Again, it's a matter of balance. A correct understanding and performance of the mitzvah of Sadaqah is therefore a good example. Rambam ends this perek, and he who treads this path brings upon himself only good and blessing. And the Torah itself tells us on a number of occasions that the Torah is for our own good. Continuing from that pasuk that he mentioned before about Abraham and Derech Hashem, there it speaks about Hashem blessing Abraham and assisting him and bringing to causing to come to pass all those things that were promised to him. The Torah mentions in a few places that the Torah is for our own good. It's not only perhaps for our own good, but it is most certainly for our own good. And those who tread this path of the Torah will know this if they have any understanding and awareness, unless they are very base and incapable of appreciating such things. So we find, for example, in Devarim Perek Yod, you should be able to see this on your screens. Perek Yod, Pasuk Yod Bet, Wa'ata Yisrael, Ma Adonai Elohecha, Sha'el Na'imach, Ki im liyirat Adonai Elohecha, Lalechet B'chol Derecho, U'le'ahava Oto, U'le'avod et Adonai Elohecha, B'chol Levavecha, B'chol Nafshecha. So here we have a brief recipe for life, essentially. What does Hashem ask of us? To fear Hashem. So this is what we're discussing here. To to love him, ולעבוד Hashem, and to serve him, בכל לבבך, בכל נפשך. And then it goes on to say, לשמור את מצוות אדוני ואת חוקותיו. And how does one do this? By religiously following the Torah, the mitzvot. Asher anochi matzavach hayom l'tov lach. These are the things that I command you this day, l'tov lach, for your own good. Very well. We shall continue on to Perek Beth. Hilchot Deot Perek Sheni. Holeh haguf to'amim hamar mothok v'hamothok mar. There are certain kinds of ailments, physical ailments, disease, where the physiology of a person is completely in complete disarray. In other words, in more common parlance, the person is totally messed up. To the extent, says Rambam, that sometimes that which is bitter, this person perceives as sweet, and the opposite as well. There are people who suffer from a particular ailment, disease. A person in a certain state of mind or physiology will wish to eat certain things that are unhealthy and not normal for a person to eat. We are familiar with certain situations apparently having to do with a very serious form of nutritional deprivation, where certain minerals or vitamins are lacking. People have been recorded, and this is not new, this is recorded in ancient times as well, as eating earth, literally trying to ingest earth, dust, the ground, because apparently there are certain minerals in it, perhaps, which the body requires. No, but this is obviously not a healthy, not a normal state of affairs. Rabbi even speaks about this here. He says, such as trying to ingest earth or coals, that is to say, charcoal. And such people can also arrive at a point where they despise and have no desire to eat healthy, good food. Such as bread, basar, and meat. And this varies, of course, from person to person, from one type of pathology to another, depending on the case. You will note that Rambam was not a vegan. Basar, Rambam says. Perhaps not sufficiently environmentally aware, but that's what Rambam thought. And just by the way, that's also what I think. If certain people would like to eat cockroaches and replace all the cows in the world with spiders, cockroaches, etc., let them go right ahead. As the Gra was once asked, so I recall being mentioned in, I think it's in Hilchot Hayim or something like that, things related to Rabbeinu Chaim Velosh in the Tamil of the Gra, where it says that it relates that the Gra was once asked why are the different, shekasim and remasim and all kinds of things that we may not eat. And he said, L'umot ha'olam, there are all kinds of things that are fine for other people, and they should feel no compunction if that's what they want to do. not for us. Kach b'nei adam shenafshotehem halot. So it is with people whose souls, that the spiritual essence of their being is unwell, is unbalanced. Mithawim u'avim hadeot haraot. Such people consider the negative types of behavior that we have discussed previously to be positive, and they think that this is what one should do. And they in fact are completely opposed to the ways that are correct and balanced, and by which we emulate Hashem. And they are not willing to make any effort to learn how to do this, to act in this way. And when they are told about the correct path, the correct hashkafa, the correct outlook, and all that flows from that outlook, they consider this to be impossible. How could one possibly think this or do this? It all depends on the malady from which they suffer. By the way, we are not discussing here classical severe mental illness, which of course exists, unfortunately, and sometimes these conditions are very serious and they have to be treated in various ways. And this too, by the way, is something that we need to mention here. We should not put too much faith in those who claim to be experts in mental health or behavior. That is to say, people whose views are not based on the Torah. Psychology and psychiatry and related fields of endeavor are based largely on the opinions of all kinds of people with regards to various aspects of human existence, life, behavior, and we should not put very much stock at all in such opinions and such theories. Psychology as well needs to be rooted, from our perspective, in the Torah. People who themselves are unwell because they are so far removed from what the Torah delineates are hardly the people who can instruct others and heal them. And Rambam gets to this point in one moment. So we're not discussing here serious mental illnesses, such as, for example, clear-cut cases of schizophrenia or manic depression or things of that nature that, of course, affect a person's behavior and his interaction with everybody else. We are discussing, however, various types of ideologies, views, and the behaviors that flow from those views, those opinions that people have formed for themselves for various reasons, because that's what they thought about and they reached that conclusion, or because, this is the more usual case, because people simply pick up these ideas from their surroundings, because that is what they hear, they see. That's what everyone says or everyone does. And those who do not are the weirdos and the strange people. But we have to understand that's not always the case. Our yardstick is one and only one, the Torah. Based on that, we know what is weird and strange and that which is correct, no matter how many people may think otherwise. And so Yeshayahu Hanavi states, so you see, this is not a new phenomenon. Yeshayahu was also aware of people who saw that which is plainly bad and yet describe it and perceive it as good. And the opposite. Samim hoshach le'or ve'or le'hoshach. Samim mar le'mathok u'mathok le'mar. So people can completely misapprehend reality, that which is good, that which is evil, that which is positive, that which is negative, that which is beneficial, and that which is destructive. It is not that difficult for people to be so bamboozled and confused that this is how they see things. And about such people it states in Mishneh ha'uzavim, or hoth yoshab lolechet b'derchei hoshech, those who abandon the correct path in order to walk in darkness. And as the familiar expression, ma'at min ha'or megaresh harbe min ha'hoshech, even a small amount of light is sufficient to drive away much darkness. In a dark room, even a tiny amount of light is enough to be able to see something, correct? Not to walk into the furniture or into the wall or something like that. Whereas when it's totally dark, you may not be able to avoid that. The light of Torah, even a small amount, is sufficient to change our perception, or the perception of a person who is completely lost, confused, and at a loss to see things as they really are. So wherever we can, we try and disseminate even very limited amounts of Torah, of light, of truth. And Rambam continues, Halakha Beth, in the Machon Shilo version, Umahi takanat holeh hanefashot. How do we treat and help people who have these emotional and intellectual misperceptions, whose behavior is completely misdirected, and their apprehension is completely mistaken? They should go to the Hachamim. In other words, to learn from them, to hear what they say and learn from that. Hachamim, of course, refers not to every person with a master's or a doctorate in this or that field. Sometimes such people may be wise and knowledgeable, I should say, not wise, may be knowledgeable in certain areas. Even, unfortunately, nowadays that also is not necessarily the case, because what used to be a doctorate today is the equivalent of what used to be a bachelor's degree, in terms of the access to such things and the ubiquitous nature of these things today. But wisdom, on the other hand, by the way, is not the same as knowledge, and wisdom is a very rare thing. Very rare indeed. The people who possess such wisdom are Hachamim, and this refers to Chachmei Torah. Shehem Rofei HaNefashot, they are the true, literally, doctors of the soul. And they can help people by teaching them modalities of behavior and outlook based on the Torah, which then allow a person to form a correct understanding and philosophy of life, and therefore they can become healthy slowly. By teaching the correct approach and the correct midoth. And all of us, by the way, each in his own way, is constantly required to examine himself and see where we need to improve our behavior and our approach, and maybe question certain assumptions that we have had in the past. And this is not easy, by the way, not at all. No one should think for a moment that these things are easy. Rambam writes in Hilchot Teshuvah, this is in Hilchot Teshuvah, Perek Zayin, which I think you should be able to see now. Rambam begins this perek by seeing that a person has free will and is able to modify his behavior and his manner of living altogether. Therefore, Rambam says, "Yishtadel adam la'asot teshuvah uninor kapel michata'o." A person must always be doing teshuvah to, as it were, remove all manner of incorrect, sinful, incorrect, confused behavior from within himself. And Rambam goes on to say, in Halacha Gimel, "Wa'al tomar she'ena teshuvah ela me'avirot she'esh bahen ma'aseh." Do not think for a moment that teshuvah relates only to averot, sinful, improper behavior, which involves a ma'aseh, some physical action, kiron zanuth u'razel u'neva, such as promiscuous behavior, theft, etc. Just as a person is required to do teshuvah with regards to these things, so a person is required to constantly, not just before Rosh Hashanah, not just between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim, and not just today, the day after Yom Kippurim, always, every day a person should examine himself, to examine himself and see where things are not right in his behavior, in his midoth, min haka'as, anger, min ha'eva, hatred or despising and extreme dislike for others, min ha'kina'ah, jealousy, min ha'taharuth, min ha'hefel, min ha'difat ha'mamon wa'kavod, all kinds of behavior which are rooted in ego, in jealousy, in covetousness. Covetousness? No, that's not right. Covetous behavior, I think that's the correct term. Or it could be also more base, more physical desires, such as Rambam says, "Meradifat ha'ma'achalot v'chayoseh bahen," being drawn constantly to things with things regarding food, being focused on these things all the time. Min hakol, Rambam says, tzarich lahazor b'teshuvah. Wa'elu ha'avonot kashim me'otam shesh b'maaseh, and these are more difficult than doing teshuvah with regards to averot that involve the maaseh. Shebezman she'adam nishka' be'elu kashehu lifrosh. It is difficult for a person to change his behavior, his midoth, more difficult than ceasing and desisting from doing something specific, physical and tangible action. As the pasuk says, Ya'azov rasha' darko we'ish awen mahshavotho, referring to a person's thoughts as well, not just his actions. So we return to Hilchot Deot, Perek Sheni. So we said the Hachamim, Chachmei Torah, are people who have true wisdom. That's how it should be, at least. And if it is not, that itself should give us pause. If we see a person lichora is a Hacham Torah, but seems not to have any understanding of these things, and there is a very serious problem here. And it may have to do with the way in which this person studied Torah for many years. Maybe it was not balanced, maybe it did not include all parts of the Torah, etc. So these Hachamim, Hen Rofei HaNefashot, says Rambam, U'yerapu Holyam B'de'ot Shemelamedim Otam, and they can heal people, they can direct them and assist them. Ad sheyachzru le'derech hatovah. And eventually these people can also return to the correct path. And those who are aware of the fact. So you first of all one has to be aware. And that itself is an achievement, to be aware that a person about himself, that a person knows that I need to change, I need to improve, I need to learn, I have to be humble enough to accept these teachings and question myself. And they do not turn to the only people who can help them, who are the Hachamim. About such people, it says in Sefer Mishneh, Musar awilim bazu. Musar is, some people might translate it as ethical teaching, but that's not a sufficiently precise translation. It is also, it includes rebuke, chastisement, telling people things they do not want to hear necessarily. And precisely for that reason, most people do not allow themselves to hear it. They would rather not hear these things. But that musar is essential. Ewilim bazu. Ewilim generally refers to a foolish person, ewil. People who have no interest in wisdom and knowledge, but more specifically, more accurately, wisdom. And bazim, livzot is to denigrate. They think all this talk of these people is nonsense, and it's beneath them. It's not for them. What do these people know? I will also mention here, and with this we will end, that the term evil, which is also pronounced by many as evil, if you look at the word and the English word evil, and if you think that they are somehow reminiscent one of the other, I do not think you would be incorrect. I tend to think that the word evil and the word ewil is essentially the same word, because those who are ewilim, by default, they will do evil, because they do not know how to distinguish, to differentiate between that which is good and that which is evil. And as we said before, such people also see things inaccurately, imprecisely. They consider that which is evil to be good, and that which is good to be evil, bad, undesirable. So how could they not do such things? We'll stop here for today. Rambam goes on to discuss now in the coming halachot how a person needs to be instructed and trained to improve himself in these ways. And again, I mentioned that all of us, each in his own way, is in need of such instruction and such improvement. We shall stop here, B'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.